Okay, everybody, good evening. As we let's wait a second. It's connecting to the Torah Direct. Okay, how's everybody doing? Everybody, good evening, everybody. I want to make just as we come to the end of the book of Shemais, the book of Vayikra starts. So we need to order the new books for the book of for the portion of Vayikra. So call the office. Make sure you. It's in another 3 weeks. Starts the book of Vayikra. Yeah, something like that. 20th, March 20th. We have a couple weeks. Okay. Good evening, everybody. This week is a Sikha of the Rebbe. We're going to learn a Sikha of the Rebbe on the holiday of Purim. I called it the unmask the Purim, and it's a fascinating Sikha that Rebbe spoke about the concept of Purim, the real behind the story of Purim, and the way Purim affects us until today. Because we know that Purim is the expression in the Gemara. It says, "Ayomim ha'elu," these days, the Skarim are remembered v'nasim, meaning that a Jewish holiday is not just a memory of the past, something that happened in the past. Would celebrate something that happened in the past. This thing happened thousands of years ago. The Skarim v'nasim means they are remembered and they happen. That in essence comes every year. The Purim comes, the holiday of Purim. It's we're supposed to reenact. It's supposed to affect this time of the year. It's supposed to have some kind of resonate in some way as a lesson or something, even in this generation. We know that it says that the holiday of Purim will never stop, even if the coming of Mashiach, when other holidays will take a second back seat. But the holiday of Purim will be an holiday that will celebrate even after the coming of Mashiach. So it must be that Purim has some kind of a connection, some kind of a power, some kind of an unbelievable lesson that maybe we're just overlooking it and not really seeing the true concept of Purim. The Rebbe talks about there was a big struggle in the time of Purim between Mordechai and Esther. The Gemara says there was an argument between both of them. They had an argument what to do, how the holiday of Purim should be celebrated. And Mordechai didn't want that the holiday of Purim should be celebrated year after year after year. Mordechai wanted that the holiday of Purim should be celebrated for, right after Purim, a year later, and that's it. They should make a celebration the year after the story, and then life goes on. Esther wanted the holiday to be celebrated on a yearly basis. And she approached the Sanhedrin, the high court of the Jewish court, and she asked that, because it's expression, Svuri Liladaitis is an expression the Talmud used. I want you to write this story for generations to come. And I wanted the Yidden, the Jews, should read the Megillah, and that's why it's called Megillas Esther. It's not called Megillas Mordechai. It's called Megillas Esther, the Megillah of Esther, because she was the one who demanded that and asked that Purim should not be celebrated one or two or that generation. She asked the High Court of Sanhedrin, the High Court by Jews, that they should establish it as a yontif forever. And that's why this yontif, Purim, is a holiday of the Rabbanan. It's a rabbinical holiday.
Can I ask you a question about that, Rabbi Bucket? The Sanhedrin, there was a Sanhedrin without a Beit HaMikdash at the time, between the time?
Yes, because there was not official Sanhedrin. They didn't have the powers of the regular Sanhedrin. And the truth is, the Sanhedrin didn't have the powers that was Sanhedrin after even the second temple. But there was the Mordechai was part of the Sanhedrin. He was part of the Sanhedrin at that time. It was not in Yerushalayim until they came back, but there was a Sanhedrin, or I would call it a symbolic Sanhedrin. That was a what do they call when you have a government that's in exile? Exiled government.
Yeah. Well, they could have had a virtual Sanhedrin.
Right.
How did they get 70 people together, right? 70 rabbis.
Right, but then all the Jews were in Persian, in Babel, in Persia, that area.
Mm-hmm.
So it was at that time, Mordechai was the head of the Sanhedrin. Actually, it says that Mordechai was not accepted by, what he was doing was not accepted by all the sages of his time. And there's beautiful stuff in the Gemara Megillah. If you ever read the Gemara, the tractate of Megillah, you can read a lot of the story behind the story, so to say. But this was a debate between Mordechai and Esther, between these two great people, and they had a different of opinion. And the rabbis agreed with Esther that they would establish it as a yontiv, as a holiday. And as I said, they called it Megillas Esther. They called it the Megillah of Esther. Now, besides the fact that she asked that it should be a holiday forever, which it is, it became a yontiv by Yidden, it became a yontiv by the Jewish nation. We read the Megillah twice on Purim, the night and the day. We give Shalach Manis and all these things that she established to be done was all Esther. It was her imagination, so to say, and her reasoning of coming up with these concepts that Yidden Jews would do on Purim, which we have been doing. 4 basic things: read the Megillah, Mashalach Manes, and Matanis Levyonim, and have a Sudas Purim, have a Suda on Purim. So these are the things that Esther asked, and these are the things that the Rabbanan, the sages of it at that time, accepted and established it as a yontif because of her desire, so to say, for Am Yisrael. Now, besides the fact, self-understood that Esther had biggest Mesiras Nefesh at that time, and the most Mesiras Nefesh at that time, as we'll bring out in the Sikha over here, that self-understood out of all the Jews, and even Mordechai, she was the hero of the day. No question about it, that she was the hero of the day. And as I mentioned on Shabbos, you have to realize, if you read the Megillah, you almost think that the story happened very quickly. It sounds like it happened within 1 year, but it's not. The history. I mean, she was in the king's palace for many years. I think it was 7 years, and she was basically a hidden individual who lived a double life, and a very lonely and scary life for many, many years, and a fear of her life. Not 1 day, not a year, but many years, and not knowing what the purpose was of this, besides following the wishes of her uncle, which was Mordechai. So it was her Mesiras Nefesh. Truly, it was her self-sacrifice that brought about this miracle, and that's why when she asked the Jews to fast for 3 days, as the Megillah tells us, they accepted it, because they understood what she was going through and what she went through all these years. They understood to fulfill her wishes, to do a fast for 3 days, 1 day after another day. So the Rebbe explains this concept of the beauty of Esther and the meaning based on the Gemara, the purpose of her establishing this holiday, so that the Jews in Boca in the year 2021 will celebrate Purim. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't be celebrating the Purim, the Gemara says. So it was for Mordechai, we wouldn't have been celebrating. So because of her. So what was her purpose? Why did she want to have the celebration on a continuous basis? That we would celebrate the Purim and we remember this day. It's a beautiful sikha, and the Rebbe brings out a beautiful lesson in what she wanted to accomplish and what she did accomplish, hopefully, with her establishing this as a yontif. If you have any questions you may ask, don't be shy. Just unmute yourself and ask the question. We start this class on page 107 in your book, text number 1. We start this class, and the Rebbe starts off. I said this is a sikha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe once said the sikha. It's written. So page 107. Venira, the verse implies, if you listen to this Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Lur Barbaum Megillah Statrim, he says the verse implies that Mordechai only called for Purim to be commemorated with joy, but did not call for its documentation nor its annual public reading. Mordechai said, what is this whole Megillah? Why are we reading this whole Megillah? What do we need to do this for? It was Esther who primarily pushed for this, as a Talmud related. Esther sent to sages, write my story for future generations, as I said. So this is a Gemara. The Gemara says. So the Gemara says that Esther wanted this. She wanted this concept. Why? So that's really the question. Rebbe wants to know why. Why was it so necessary to establish the reading of the Megillah? As we know that you have to listen to every word of the Megillah, and you have to hear the Megillah from the reader. That's why many people ask about Zoom this year. You cannot hear the Megillah on Zoom. You can't be Yaitse. You can hear the Megillah on Zoom, but you cannot do the mitzvah of hearing the Megillah on Zoom. You can't. Just like you can't hear shofar on Zoom. You can't hear the shofar. You can't hear the Megillah on Zoom. You have to hear it from the person that reads it. And you have to hear every word in halacha. That's what the rabbis established. You have to hear every word that the Megillah reader says. So the Rebbe brings down a Gemara, goes back to the Gemara. This is a Gemara Megillah in general. Shloim Gemara Megillah. It's a very fascinating Gemara. Very, very fascinating stories of the whole story of Purim. A lot of people don't even realize that there's a big story behind the story. So text number 2, page 108. The students of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai asked him, for what reason were the Jewish people in the generation deserving an annihilation? Gemara, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai asked the question, why was the Jewish people deserve such a big punishment? This was a genocide. Haman wanted to do a genocide in the Jewish nation. He had the power to basically annihilate the whole Jewish nation. Why would the Jewish nation? There was never in history like that way, such a situation. Not even World War II was there a capability, unless he would have taken over the whole world. But Haman had the capability. He bought the Jewish nation off of Achashverosh for 10,000 silver pieces. He got it. He got the entire nation. It was sold. The whole Jewish nation was sold to him. He had the full power because the Jews were in Babylon and in Israel. That's where they were. And finished. He had the capability, b'yoyim echad, as the Megillah tells us. B'yoyim echad, Haman was not a stupid guy. And he realized he's not going to be able to stretch this thing out in a very long time. If he wants to annihilate the Jewish nation, he has to do that in one day. And that's why he planned it for one day. This was a one-day situation. That and self-stood, how are you going to annihilate a nation in one day? You have to get 127 nations to get involved. And it was one-day situation, a one-day situation. So the question's asked, you want to punish the Jewish nation. God wants to punish the Jewish nation. I mean, annihilate the Jewish nation. I mean, it's like Like, it sounds a little bit far-fetched. Rav Shimon said to them, you tell me. They wanted to hear the teacher give the answer. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. So he said to them, because they enjoyed the feast of the wicked one Achashverosh. If you listen to the Megillah says, Achashverosh made a party. He made a party for 180 days. It's good to be king. He made a party for 180 days. Can you imagine 180 days? That's like half a year. He made a party, right? And then he made another party for Shushan. He invited all the Jews. And there was a big debate. Should they go to the party or shouldn't go to the party? Now, this was not a debate only, should we go and eat some good food? This is a debate. The king invites you to the party. What do? You go to the party, you don't go to the party. They went to Mordechai. He was one of the leaders of the Jewish nation. And he said not to go to the party, but the Jews went to the party. They felt that it was an obligation to go to the party. So he responded. So Rav Shimon said, this might be true for those in Shushan. But for those in the rest of the world, which again, it was not so big area, but Shushan was only the capital, who did not participate in the feast because only Shushan was invited. The Jews were invited only in Shushan. Why should they be killed? He said to him, then you tell us. He said to him, because they prostrated before the idol. And this is an interesting Gemara. They prostrated, they bowed to the idol. Which idol? What idol? Achashverosh had no idols. There was other times in history that there was kings, Nebuchadnezzar made idols and had Jews bow down to the idol. That was the famous story of Hanan, Shov, Azariah, with the three guys who didn't bow down to the idol. All Jews bowed down to Nebuchadnezzar. Idols he established. They were thrown into the fire. The whole story. So the Jews then bowed down to the idol. But we all know that Haman, Achashverosh demanded that everybody bow down to Haman. And the Gemara says that Haman had an idol around his neck. And that's why Achashverosh didn't bow down to him. That's why Mordechai did not bow down to him. Because Haman was really interested in getting the Jews to bow down to the idol, to his idol that he carried around his neck. But the Jews were in a catch-22 situation. The Jews were in a catch-22 situation. What do? You anger the king. You anger Haman. What do? It's pikuach nefesh. It's a life and death situation. This was a struggling time for the Jewish nation, as they struggled throughout exile. This was not a new dilemma. What do you do in this situation? How do you respond to such a situation? And you'll soon see that the Jews were not too happy with Mordechai in that time, that generation, especially before the miracle. They were not too happy. They felt that Mordechai was really antagonizing. He was antagonizing the king. He was antagonizing, the government. He was getting them in trouble. He was putting them in danger. And the truth is, that's what he was doing. Mordechai put the Jews in danger. Because if you listen to the Megillah, it says that Haman was angry after Mordechai didn't bow down to him. And then he called it Am Mordechai. He called the nation of Mordechai. So this was the question. This was the question at that time. And it was debated in the halls of study by the rabbis at that time too. What should you do? Should you bow down? You shouldn't bow down. Pikuach nefesh. It's life and death situation. You bow down to the idol, bow down to Haman that's wearing an idol. Well, you don't bow down to Haman that's wearing an idol. Most rabbis in that time said you bow down. You're not bowing down to the idol, bow down to Haman. He's not an idol. Following the decree of the king. So the Frierdiker Rebbe in text number 3 explains the Gemara. Pibis Lubavitcher Rebbe says, of the two reasons mentioned in the Talmud. Now, I just want to give you the Frierdiker Rebbe was like Mordechai in many ways, as you'll see, as we all know. The Frierdiker Rebbe was like a Mordechai of his generation. He was he went against the Russian government. He went openly against communism. He put his life in danger, and he put other people's lives in danger by him going against the Russian government. So it's interesting. You'll just see how the Frierdiker Rebbe expresses himself, and then we'll see how the Rebbe expresses himself about this concept. And the truth is that the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, in a way, lived in two different generations and in two different realities. And I think that the Rebbe, as you'll see, the Rebbe felt that this generation needed a different avenue, I will see, a different way of dealing with things than per se as the Frierdiker Rebbe dealt in under the communist rule. For two reasons, let's go to the wording of the Frierdiker Rebbe. For two reasons mentioned in the Talmud, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai maintains that the extreme spiritual downfall experienced by the Jews before Purim came as a result of idolatry. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was afraid of Jews falling into idol worship. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai felt that Mordechai was afraid that the Jews would disappear. And the only way he felt that the Jews would survive, you got to go out and you have to stand up. And you got to put yourself in danger. At the time, the growing opinion among the Jews was that human survival came through achieving physical power and standing. In other words, they believed that living a materialistic and a worldly lifestyle was paramount. That could be part of the system. Accordingly, they felt they needed to focus on their status as a means to advance their physical lives. They needed, and again, I don't want to blame the Jews at that time, because again, they were under great pressure. Nobody's blaming anybody, but the Jews at that time were under great pressure. Again, it was not political pressure. It was life and death pressure. If you read the Megillah itself, and if you know the history, don't forget that not 70 years before this story, Nebuchadnezzar, Melabava, destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, took a majority of Jews into captivity. So the Jews were under a lot of spiritual pressure. They were totally taken away from their land, Eretz Yisrael. They were put into an alien country, and were under the pressure of this country, which was ultimately Persia destroyed Bavel, and they became the leaders and the kings and the monarchs of the Jewish nation. The Bav was the foundation of the Nebuchadnezzar's philosophy. And it was the Jewish sin of bowing down to the Nebuchadnezzar idol. That's it. So this is what happened. What happened was, under the pressure of Nebuchadnezzar, of destruction of the temple, and Jews being forced into Bavel, into Babylon, and ultimately into Persia, the Jewish people, self-understood, felt the pressure at the time, and they felt they had to, so to say, bow down. Bowing down to an idol doesn't mean per se the idol. It means bowing down to the authorities of the time. Bowing, as he says, bowing means surrendering their own beliefs while allowing others to succeed their own. And that was they felt. They had no choice. They weren't going to antagonize the Babylonians. They weren't going to antagonize the Persians. And they felt whatever the Persian king wanted, that's what they're going to do. And if the king of Persia told them to bow before Haman, they'll all bow before Haman. And that's what it says in the Megillah. So, I mean, it's not something new. It says in the Megillah, they bowed before Haman. The only one who didn't bow before Haman was one guy, and that was Mordechai. He was the only person, the only Jew that didn't bow before this guy. Now you can understand. It's not so you have to be. You can understand why Haman, egotistical maniac, hungry for power, is going to get angry at such a situation. Adopting such an ill-grounded logic eventually led many Jews to say they abandoned their faith, careless to desecrating the Jewish heritage and practicing as they did, and that's what happened. And that's why the Megillah says in text number 4, and all the king's servants who were in the king's gate would kneel and prostrate themselves before Haman. So had the king commanded, but Mordechai would neither kneel nor prostrate. He didn't do it. He didn't budge. And when Haman saw Mordechai would neither kneel nor prostrate himself before him, Haman became full of wrath. So in essence, you read the Megillah, Mordechai angers Haman. He angers the authorities of the time. But it seemed contemptible to him to lay hands on Mordechai alone. Haman said, I'm going to only pick on Mordechai. So, for they had told him Mordechai's nationality, he told me he's a Jew. And Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout Achashverosh's entire kingdom, Mordechai's people. He blamed Mordechai, and because he was a Jew. Now I told you, the Gemara, and this next Gemara you'll see, next text, the Gemara says that not only the Jews were not happy, not only was Haman not happy with Mordechai, but the Jews were not happy with Mordechai. They felt that he was doing something not correct. So the Gemara says in Talmud, text number 5, the Gemara says, Scripture says in the Megillah, it says, there was a certain Jew, Ish Yehudi. How do we introduce Mordechai in the Megillah? Ish Yehudi, there was this Jew, Ushmai Mordechai, Ba'ir ben Kish Ishimini. His name was Mordechai, the son of Kish, a man of Benjamin. There's a certain Jew in the capital city of Shur, whose name was Mordechai, the son of Yar, the son of Shimi, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. So the Gemara says, Rava expounds and says, the Jewish people said about Mordechai. Listen what they said. The congregation of Israel said, look what this Yehudim has done to me and how a Benjamite had repaid me. When a Yehudim, who is Yehudi? Who's Yehudi? Is David HaMelech. He was from the tribe of Judah. Mordechai was not from the tribe of Judah. He was the tribe of Benjamin. Which refers to David's culpability for not killing Mordechai's grandfather, Shimi, although he's liable to death. So they said, you know what? The Jewish people said David HaMelech should have killed Shimi. Shimi, separate story, it's a story in the prophet, Shimi ben Geda, who went against David HaMelech, and David HaMelech had Achmanas on him and did not kill him. So the Jewish people said, what a shame. He should have killed his grandfather. And if he would have killed his grandfather, he wouldn't be here. Which is allowed for Mordechai's birth and his eventual incitement of Haman's jealous vendetta against Jewish people. And how a Benjamite repaid me refers to Saul's culpability for not immediately killing Haman's grandfather, the Amalekite king. So came a Benjamite who was actually Saul was also a relative of Mordechai who didn't kill Agag. So because of this Benjamite because of David Melech and Shaul Melech, we are left with Mordechai, who's making us tzadis. Mordechai, who's making us tzadis. So in essence, the Gemara says that the Jewish people at the time felt that Mordechai created this mess. He created this mess, and we're suffering from him. But Mordechai didn't budge. In essence, Mordechai did not budge from Achashverosh and Haman, and Mordechai didn't budge from the Jewish people either. He was I want to call him a radical. It was a Pinchas. So Mordechai felt, and ultimately, it wouldn't be a Monday morning quarterback. He was ultimately right, because that would not save them. It would not save them. It would not save the Jewish people by them totally giving themselves over to a Haman and Achashverosh. They would have not survived anyway.
Rabbi, but can I ask you something about that?
Yes.
There must have been other people besides Mordechai. Mordechai must have had some followers, right? There must have been some faction among the Jewish people. Mordechai may have been the leader or the most prominent of them, but there must have been others that went along with Mordechai, right?
Very good, but you should know, Mordechai was not only leading the Jewish nation, Mordechai was also very, very connected in the king's palace, as the Megillah says.
Mm-hmm.
Mordechai Yeshe B'Shar HaMelech. Mordechai was one of the king's advisors. So he had political, and the truth is that if you learn the Gemara Megillah, you'll also learn that the rabbis were not too happy with that either. Mm-hmm. So Mordechai was well connected. So he was well connected. He saved the king, right? We know that in the Megillah too, that he saved the king. He was one of the ministers of the king. He saved the king. He sat in at the king's palace. He was a well-connected individual. So he had a lot of connections, political connections and spiritual connections. He was one of the Jewish leaders in the spiritual life.
Yeah, but he had other Jewish followers, I assume, right? It wasn't just...
Yeah, he had his followers. I'm sure he had a lot of followers. The question is that's why at the end of Megillah, it says, Roiv Echav. If you listen to the end of Megillah, it says, Mordechai went out to most of his brothers. The Gemara says, most of his brothers, not all his brothers. There was an interesting debate going on. Even as I said, even in the Sanhedrin, there was an interesting debate going on. Because Mordechai, that's what the Megillah says, Mordechai Yada. Mordechai knew something that most Jews didn't know. And not even his associates didn't know. Mordechai knew things that other people didn't know, they all knew about it after the Megillah.
What did he know?
Mordechai told a beautiful Jewish girl to go into the palace and not say she was Jewish. Which rabbi would allow that?
Yeah.
Which people thought he was doing the wrong thing, right? She could have said, right, I'm Jewish, and everything would have been over. He married a Jewish woman. This guy was a rabid anti-Semite, hated Jews, and he married a Jewish woman. That's why God has the last laugh. Isn't that amazing? He married a Jewish woman. Go figure that one out. And the reason was that she didn't say it, and the only reason she didn't say it because he said not to say it. So Mordechai knew something that that ultimately we know the story. Whether he knew exactly what was going to happen, whether he knew that something was going to happen. Did Esther had it? Well, those who say Darius was there's an argument in the Gemara. Those who say that Darius was Esther's son. Those who say that, I don't know if that's been proven totally historically, but there are those who say that that was her son, and he ultimately gave permission to build the second temple. So Esther followed the directions of Mordechai, because Esther understood that her journey was connected. She felt that her journey was connected to what's happening in the situation that's happening at the time. Now, as I told you, Esther was in the palace for many years, and she lived a Jewish life. It's a very difficult life she lived. She lived a Jewish life in a way. She lived a double life. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu also lived that way for many years in the palace of Mitzrayim, palace of Pharaoh. But Esther was, after the Torah was given, she was obligated to keep kosher. She kept Shabbos. She kept a Jewish life under the nose of Achashverosh and everything else that was going on in this palace. So she also understood that this was not a normal situation. Something was not the normal going on over here. There was something behind. There was something that was going to be needed to be rectified and needed to come out through this journey. And that was her Mesiras Nefesh. That was her self-sacrifice that she took upon herself this journey. And it was a very frightening, lonely journey for this woman, this Jewish woman in a house of lions. So therefore, in text number 6, Rabbi Elkabaz, who was a Kabbalist, said, Esther's actions rectified the sin of enjoying from the feast. Esther smuggled kosher food into the palace. Esther made a firm commitment to herself that she would not touch the food provided by the king. Her behavior would have undoubtedly brought great shame to the king. And indeed, Haman sized upon this when he made his pitch for the Jews to be killed, arguing that they were fifth column. Imagine, Haman is telling Achashverosh, we need to kill the Jews because they're a fifth column in the country. When he's married to a Jew who is living a double life in his house. The truth is that the decision put Esther in a grave danger, and she risked her life. And that's why, again, we really have to realize the greatness of Esther. We really have to understand that this was a long, very long process, very long and dangerous and extremely lonely journey for her. And frightening, extremely frightening. And that's why you understand that when Mordechai comes to Esther and tells her to go to the king and tell him the truth, she says, are you kidding me? That's your plan? That's the great plan we're going to do. I'm going to go to the king now. And she says, I'm going to go to the king now. I haven't been invited 30 days to the king. I'm going to go now tell him, hello, my dear husband, you're married to a Jewish woman. I won't make it through the door. You learn the Gemara. The Gemara says the walk that Esther did from her room, from her chamber, to the king's chair where he sat on his king's chair was extremely, extremely a frightening walk. That when she walked into the room, she was automatically going against the king's. It was a law of the country. You can't come into the king's chamber without the king invited you. And a miracle happened. You listen to the Megillah. A miracle happened. And the Gemara says he almost like the Achashverosh like forcingly picked up his it was like forcingly picked up his Shabbat Hazav. He picked up his whatever scepter, whatever he held in his hand. But the people were shocked. And that's why he says right away, he says, I'll give you half of the kingdom. In essence, I'm the king. I can do whatever I want. I can change the law. But look at it. Look at this rabbi continues and says, because it's a fascinating question that everybody has. Presuming, pay attention, he says, Esther did not display the self-sacrifice to avoid being married to a king, as she did with the instance of eating kosher food. How did Esther marry this king? He was a guy, not Jewish. Throughout history, people they went on death not to be married out of their faith. Here, she willingly, or whatever, against her will, but she was there. She lived with this guy. Due to the risk in her own life, but she was allowed to live with him. She had no choice. But the food she did not eat. And the Shabbos she kept. So you see, the sages say that you see that behind that, in essence, there was something she understood that there are certain things that she needs to watch out from. There's certain things that she can give into. If she wants to accomplish what the mission's going to accomplish, whatever the mission Mordechai wants to accomplish through this journey. I'm trying to show you, I believe, in general, that's what I'm saying, you should learn Megillah. I think that you'll realize there's a whole story behind the story. This was not a very simple story that happened. Yet she chose as if to risk her life to eat like a Jew, so that to atone for the Jewish failure in this regard, she could only mollify herself that she had no choice, but she did it. So when it came to living with this king, she said she had no choice. When it came to keeping kosher, the Gemara says she didn't want to stop that. She didn't want to give in to that. So again, the real hero here is Esther. The real hero here is Esther, who understood that she had to work through the system to accomplish her mission. And the truth is, she didn't realize her mission till the end of Megillah, where Mordechai tells her to go to the king. And then she realizes her mission. And therefore she tells them, let's go fast for 3 days. Get all the Jews to fast for 3 days. Because to do this mission, we have to accomplish in the normal, which she did ultimately. She went to the king and the king accepted her, and she made a party, as the Torah says, as the Megillah says, and she invited him to the party, and she invited Haman to the party. So she worked in the natural way. She made a party for them, and she self-understood that this was going to have to play out in both worlds. This is going to have to play out in the natural and the supernatural way. Because in the natural way, it's not going to work. And only if the supernatural is going to be there. This natural phenomena doesn't make sense that it would work. And if you understand the story, if you read the Megillah, it doesn't work naturally. It wouldn't work because how did it suddenly change from A to B in a total transformation? I don't think she would ever imagine that it would be transformed in a moment, in a natural kind of of a life. But she went in a natural way. She prepared herself in the natural phenomena of the world. At the same moment, she said, go pray for me 3 days, go fast for 3 days, and I will fast also for 3 days. The Gemara says, the Talmud says, that Esther had such an effect on the story that she actually transformed the Jewish people of her time. With the way she lived her life, and ultimately what her self-sacrifice and the way she showed the Yidden, the Jews of her time, what means to go through the system and to be connected at the same time above and beyond, just do crazy things within the system. And at the same time, because you have such a mun and betachen, you have such faith and such conviction that you can do things in a normal way, in a supernatural way. The Jewish people were affected by that more than as the Gemara says, more than from the time of Matan Torah. Esther had such an effect on the Jewish people. They transformed the Jewish people when they realized this story, when they realized what was happening in front of their eyes, that they had this woman in a palace, and what she did, and the way she did it, with such poise and such class and such faith, that there was something they couldn't back out. They also started to believe. They also accepted that. It was just an open concept to them. It was not, you understand, it was so clear to them, the Jewish people at that time, what happened, that they all started to have betachon in the Eibishter. They all had a betachon in God that they never had since Matan Torah, the Gemara says. The Talmud says the Jewish people accomplished faith in God at the time of this story that they hadn't had since the giving of the Torah. So that was the power of Esther. That's the power of her Mesiras Nefesh. That's the beauty of the story. That's why you should listen to the Megillah and see, just imagine you're Esther. Imagine you're this woman. You're not Mordechai who's sitting out of the palace. You're the one who's sitting in the palace. You're the one who has to go through what you have to go through, and ultimately transform a whole situation, transform a whole reality through your actions. So let's go text number 7. The Gemara says, I'm saying the Gemara talks about the greatness of Esther. The Gemara talks about Esther. Again, that's what it's called Megillas Esther. The verse states, and they stood at the lowest part of the mountain. Aviti bar Achama bar Chazda said, this teaches us, the Holy One, blessed be, overturned the mountain above the Jews like a bowl. And he said to them, if you accept the Torah, excellent. And if not, over there you'll be buried spot. Avacha Yaakov said, from here there's a substantial kavet to the obligation to fulfill the Torah. Rava said, even so, they again accepted it willingly at the time of Achashverosh. That's why you see in the wording of the Megillah, it says, Kimu v'kiblu, that the Jewish people, Kimu v'kiblu, they took upon themselves and they rededicated themselves that they never did from the time of the giving of the Torah. And the Jewish people ordained, and they took upon them. The Jewish people ordained that what they have already taken upon themselves through coercion of Mount Sinai. So the Mount Sinai was through coercion. Over here, they saw an unbelievable miracle that this girl did in a very natural fashion. This girl connected her faith with her life in such an unbelievable way that the Jewish people all at that time said, we all have to do the same thing. We all need to do the same thing. We don't have to become supernatural. We have to be we can be all natural Jews and still have unbelievable faith like this Esther has faith. So the Rebbe says in text number 8, arguably, just as Mordechai and Esther took differing approaches in their effort to combat the decree, they also would have emphasized different aspects of the eventual miracle. Mordechai emphasized the unprecedented spiritual victory. Mordechai said this is a spiritual victory because he was not in the palace. He will daven, will learn, God will protect us. Namely, the return will do tshuva and will complete and was so complete. As the Talmud says, they ordained what they had taken upon themselves. They acted accepting willingly in the time of Achashverosh, managed to remove the punishment from the back of Matan Torah. It was for this reason that Mordechai wanted to make the holiday of Purim a day of prohibitive labor. Not like Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the day when historically the Jews received the second tablets. Also at Mount Sinai, of course. He intended to provide Jews for all future generations a day properly dedicated to the time of Purim's soul-centered nature. So that's what he wanted. Make a party. Why make a party? It's a day of repentance. Esther, however, prioritized the miracle aspect as it was expressed in the actual salvation from Haman's decree. Esther said no. Esther says, I don't want this holiday to be a spiritual holiday. I don't want this holiday to be about repentance, about our personal, deeper introspection. I want this holiday to be about joy. I want this holiday to be about feasting. I want this holiday to be about giving each other gifts. I want this holiday to be about helping one another. I want this holiday to be about reading this Megillah. Because I want this holiday to be what it really is. And that's a physical salvation. God simply saved the Jews. He transformed a physical reality. It's even almost, you think about it, Yetzias Mitzrayim, God took the Jews out of Egypt. He didn't take them out of Persia. They still stayed in Persia. Saved them in the same place. Just like she was saved she had self-sacrifice and was saved in the king's palace. The Jewish people were saved in Persia. And many of them continued to live in Persia and Babylon and Persia for many years after that. And as we know, that when the Jewish people left to build a second temple, majority of the Jews didn't leave. They stayed in Persia. They stayed in Babel. In other words, Esther stressed the rescue of the Jewish body. As Mordechai Yafi writes, contrasting the overall spiritual Hanukkah miracle of the oil, that on Hanukkah we celebrate the oil. We're not telling. It's funny, on Hanukkah we don't celebrate the victory of the war. We celebrate the victory of the oil. It's a miracle, a spiritual miracle. On Purim we're celebrating the victory over saving of life. On Purim the decree was to destroy the kill the Jewish bodies, and not their souls. That's why the eventual rescue from the material threat was commemorated with joy, specifically through feasting, as opposed to Hanukkah, where the 8 days of miracle spiritual nature, not to require a daily meal. It's lighting the menorah. On Purim, Esther wanted you should have a party. You should have a feast, a big feast. And maybe you should get drunk. So the Rebbe says, this is the beauty of Purim. This is why the rabbis agreed to Esther. Because the rabbis understood that, and that's why that's why Purim will stay forever. And Purim is important to us today. As we'll see, the Rebbe will say. Let's try to finish this off. So text number 9, the Rebbe brings down the statement of on the concept of belief. Absolute trust in God should lead you to adopt the following convictions: to not worship anyone other thing than God, to put your hope to put no hope in any person or depend on anyone, to not work to win others' approvals, to not flatter them, to not be compelled to agree when faced with something antithetical to your service to God, to not be intimidated by another social status, to not be afraid of ideological conflicts, to free yourself from excessive expressions of gratitude and constant need to repay other favors. If you need to rebuke somebody, you should not be afraid of the slighting them. Do not shy even from the humiliation if necessary, so that your rebuke is effective, and do not embellish people's false ways. That is Mordechai. That's Mordechai. That is when you have Emunah. That was the Frierdiker Rebbe. That was the previous Lubavitch Rebbe. So that's why you look in text number 10. The Frierdiker Rebbe says, when we arrived at the courtyard of death, he writes his memoirs of how he survived under the communist rule. They led me in a strange large chamber in which 15 people sat along both sides of a long table. At the head of this table sat another 2, and I was seated opposite them at the foot of the table. My 3 guards sat behind me, and left, right, and center. One of those seated at the head of the table addressed me. We are the members of the party committee to investigate religion, now occupied in investigating the Jewish religion. We have various questions. We already summoned Rabbi Berman and Rabbi Goldenberg. We asked them what we asked, and they answered what they answered. Now we have summoned Rabbi Schneerson to resolve certain issues pertaining to Kabbalah and Chassidim. All of this was said in the Russian language. I answered them in Yiddish. Yidafka didn't answer them in Russian. I've already made it clear on 2 former occasions on which I was summoned to the Cheka, some kind of an investigation, that I will not budge from my principles. There is yet to be born, and never will be born, a man or a demon who will move me in the slightest degree from my principles. Before I finished my words, I was interrupted by a committee member seated on the right side of the table. He lifted the revolver that laid on the table. In addition to the arms that had wore on their belts, a revolver lay on the table for each of the assembled, and he pointed it at me, saying, "This toy does away with principles. Fear of it has opened many mouths. Even the dumb have become talkative before it." You have utterly mistaken, I replied. This toy impresses only the cowardly atheist, who has but a single world and many gods. In Yiddish writes, Ein Welt und a Sach Gette. Every hideous has his own God. Every hedonist has his own God. But as for us, who have but a single God and believe in 2 worlds, the toy which you are brandishing does not only fail to frighten me, it makes no impression upon me. I want to skip the next text because I don't know whether to bring down the Satmar Rebbe. Also was a very big Hanoi. I know I had to bring it down. But we all know that, and I want to go to the Rebbe as we're running out of time. So the Rebbe says in text number 12a, notwithstanding the firm standing taken by Judah, page 120, and Mordechai in their respective times, as well as many tzaddikim and Jews all throughout the ages, despite their acts of bravery, there were always outside forces that limited even these heroes. The nations we lived under were often oppressive and at times had specific laws restricting our freedom. This prevented Jews from fully asserting themselves and having complete agency. And we know that. We know that the Frierdiker Rebbe ultimately was chased out of Russia and out of Poland. He came to America. And he came here beaten up and very sick. But the Rebbe says self-interest today is a different world. And today, look at page 12, text number 12b, page 121. Today's generation has been witness to a sea change of treatment of Jews. The obstructions to a Jewish free expression are gone, as our host nation now gives us free reign to do as we please. Consequently, the onus is now on us, the Rebbe says. It's up to the Jews to take hold of it, be fruitful, and multiply greatly wherever they are, as already taken place in many places, which such the United States, along with many other countries, have adopted this tolerant stance. Even countries that have recently restricted Jewish practice are now abolishing these laws. And were talked about many times recently. Not only are Jews free to follow their own destiny, moreover, world governments are now assisting us to do so. Besides the ability to operate freely in our own space, it's now becoming progressively easier to take hold of spaces all across the globe. Across the world, people have become increasingly receptive to Yiddishkeit, to Torah and mitzvahs. In the cases of Jews and 7 laws of Noah, even to non-Jews. So we have a whole different reality. Baruch Hashem. We have the capability of not fighting the system, but working with the system. We have the capability to transform the world. And the Rebbe, I believe, felt that in many ways, that the world has been transformed. That we are living in a messianic time. For as we know, the Rambam says, what is a messianic time? Is that the Jews will not be under any dominion and rulership of other countries. But Jews will have freedom. And since the downfall of communism, Jews have freedom. And the truth is, in many ways, we are like the Jews who were after the story of Purim. After the story of Purim, as the Megillah says, Mordechai became a great person in Persia. The Jewish people were respected, and Jews had their total liberty. And ultimately were given permission to even build the second temple, which they did. We're living in that kind of a period of time. And that's why, again, Purim is important for us. Purim is important for us. Because that's why the Rebbe says that Esther wanted that Purim should never be forgotten. To remind the Jews that there'll come a time, there is a time at that time, there'll come a time again, that Jews are going to be free, like in Persia, like after the story of Purim. And it's your opportunity to change it. You don't have to break the world. You can work through the world. You don't have to have Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice like I had. You can do it without Mesiras Nefesh. You might have to have a little self-sacrifice and give up certain pleasures and certain desires that you want. But to change the world is ready to be changed. Messianic time means that the world is ready to be changed. The world is ready to listen. The world is ready to listen. Because the world, especially today, we all know, we see in the world is such a confused world. It's such a world that has no direction. Nobody knows what to. We need to give them the Jews. That's where the Jews need to step up and give the world a focus. Give the world a purpose. We can do it. That's what Esther wanted to teach it to us. we can do it in a happy way, in a celebratory way, in being kind to other people. Helping out the poor, helping, being nice to another person, giving him food, getting together in Mit Hashem, and celebrating Purim together. And that's why the rabbis accepted that. If it would be if it will go with the Mordechai way only in a spiritual concept, then we would say, oh, maybe we don't need this because maybe we're not connected to the spiritual concept at this present time. But we're surely connected to the physical concept at this present time. So the Rebbe writes in text number 14, as we come to the end, the Rebbe writes, notwithstanding the Jews' sin in enjoying the feasts, the Megillah teaches us that at their core, the Jewish nation is one that neither kneels nor bows. Ultimately, we have shown the world throughout history that we might play around, but we don't kneel or bow. We ultimately don't give in. When time comes, when we know we're pushed to the corner, we don't give in. And that's the beauty. So even the Jews at that time that sinned ultimately proved they might have sinned, they might have eaten, might have done things that they shouldn't have done, but it didn't take away from their essence that they wouldn't bow. And they followed the Mordechai and they didn't bow. This quality of holding true to their beliefs is what enabled the Jewish people to survive 2,000 years of exile and to hold fast to their heritage that is so different from any other people. When Jews access their inner neither kneeling nor prostrating themselves, the world takes notice. Standing firmly and assertively for what we believe in will engender the world's honor and respect. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, of blessed memory, would always say the same thing. He would always say that he was the rabbi and chief rabbi in England, and he was also very connected to the parliament in England and to all the prime minister. And he always said that he learned being involved with them, with the non-Jewish world, was that they respect a Jew that respects himself. And he never had a problem in any place of leadership and government, wherever he went. And the Rebbe felt that way. That Baruch Hashem, we're living in a messianic time. We can be an example to the world. We can show the world, through the world, how and at the same time as we live as humans and we live as others in this world, we live a Jewish life, a life that is connected to something that's higher than the world. We do what Esther did with Mesiras Nefesh, that she lived for, as I said, not 1 month, not a year, but many years. She did it with self-sacrifice. She lived in the palace. She was the queen of Persia. And at the same moment, with Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, she lived as a Jewish woman. Today, we don't have to have that self-sacrifice. We can be proud Americans and proud Jews. And there's no contradiction whatsoever. There's no contradiction. And just like the Jewish people learned that at the time of the story of Mordechai and Esther, we should all learn it today. And that's why Esther is the hero of the story. And that's why we read the Megillah Esther. And that's why we do everything that Esther tells us to do, because Esther continues to be an example to us as Jews here in America in the year 2021. I wish you all a beautiful, wonderful, happy Purim, and the Shem hope to see you all, whether at Chabad, we're going to have reading of the Megillah inside and outside. So if you're uncomfortable to come inside, You can stay outside, and they'll be reading Megillah. The main thing is to come to hear the Megillah. That's what Esther wanted you to do. You should come on Thursday night and hear the Megillah. And so to come on Friday morning and hear the Megillah. That's what she wants you to do. So let's follow Esther, and let's do what she wanted us to do, which the rabbis agreed, and hear the Megillah on Thursday night and on Friday morning. Thursday night's class of the JLI, the Journey of the Soul, is going to be tomorrow night at 7:30 instead of Thursday. So hope to see you tomorrow night also at 7:30. If not, see you all on Thursday, dressed up in costumes. You're wearing a mask already anyway, so you'll be dressed up, totally covered in costumes. Nobody know who you are. And we'll see you Thursday night inside the Chabadis, outside the Chabadis, starting, I believe, at 5 o'clock and on. So have a wonderful night. Have a wonderful Purim. God bless us all. Let's hope that the miracles of Purim will happen again today, and God will transform everything, change everything. That's one of the lessons you learn from Purim. If you read the Megillah, everything was totally changed. Everything. Haman wanted to kill Mordechai, he was killed. Achashverosh wanted to sold the Jews. Ultimately, he saved the Jews. Everything was changed. Whatever was going one way went a total U-turn the other way. And that's why it's called Nahapachu. It's a total transformation. So let us hope that, again, it will be a total transformation from darkness to light, darkness in the world to light in the world, sickness in the world to health in the world, and sadness in the world to joy in the world. And we'll have a joyous and beautiful holiday. Have a wonderful night, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Asaku
Do you have a question? Was it clear, the Sikha?